When I found out there was going to be a Dexter prequel, I'll be honest, I wasn't excited. I'm sick of how they're milking everything these days. But I'll be the first to admit, I was completely wrong here. This prequel surprised me. With the quality of the show, the quality of the directing, and the quality of the writing, everything is better than I thought it would be. Even the acting compares to the original show. There are very few sequels like this. No, this isn't Better Call Saul, but it's still good. And the fact that this show is good is a surprise, but a testament to the people who made it. This isn't a money grab, and that's what I love most about the show. So this video is just going to serve as my whole opinion on the series. This will be my last video I make on Dexter Original Sin, and for it, I brought a special guest, SilenceAve. Please check out his channel. He made some of the best content on the books that I've ever seen, and some of the most interesting Dexter content on YouTube. So check him out. Again, he's really popular. I'll be surprised if you haven't heard of him, but do check him out if you don't know him. I'm really happy to have him on this video. But if you liked the video at any point, remember to like and subscribe and leave a comment. Tell me, would you rather have a thought daughter or a psychopath son? I mean, to be honest, to call Deb a thought daughter when Dexter's going for all these women feels a bit harsh, but is that sexism? I don't know. Anyway, onto the video. So one of the things I love about Original Sin as a prequel is it really reminds me of season 1 and 2 of the show. One of the things I've always said I've always loved about the first 2 seasons of this show is that we don't know much about the characters, and the season's storylines act as revelations. In the first season we find out about Dexter's brother, and we find out why Dexter is the way he is, what happened to him as a child, and that's really important to his character. In the second season, we find out about Dexter's dad and how Dexter's dad messed him up, how Dexter's dad cheated on his wife with Dexter's mother, and we find out all these things about his dad. And this season, it keeps up with that. I mean, for me, that's where the original show really lost the magic. It stopped being about character revelations and started becoming about Dexter becoming Batman, and there's definitely some of that here. But the vast majority of the show is good. Particularly in this season, we find out a lot about Harry, and that's something I'm going to talk about a bit later, but that's something that really, really interests me. We also see a lot of Dexter and how he sort of develops his skills. Again, I talk about this a lot in my video about Patrick Gibson's portrayal of Dexter. He does an amazing job, by the way. Though, I mean, the smile, it could use some work.
About that prick's face when he saw the gat.
We see him learn new skills, such as even using the M99, which they do retcon here, and I mean, they did this in the last spin-off, New Blood. They say it's ketamine instead, which I think is a bit unrealistic, and that annoys me a bit. They continue the ketamine thing here. I don't like it, but yeah. Anyway, I've already made a whole video about why I like Patrick Gibson as Dexter. This is something I spoke to SilenceAve about. So here's our conversation. It was a few minutes long. Again, thank you SilenceAve for coming on. Where I do want to start is actually talking about Dexter himself. Obviously, you've read the books, so I'm quite interested to know how accurate you think Dexter is in this show, especially compared to Michael C. Hall's version and the book version.
I really like how they've had it where he feels more, you said it just in your video,
yeah,
where he feels like, compared to Michael C. Hall's version, who's much more calculated, much more, you know, clean and neat, Patrick Gibson's version is much more, he needs to get that release. He's much more like savage and brutal in the way he does things because it's all new to him, and he can't really hide it on his face. He's not as good at pretending or, you know, just hiding things. He's made a lot of mistakes so far up till episode 9.
Yeah, definitely. And Michael C. Hall, his version of Dexter is this perfect psychopath, and he has so much patience compared to this version of Dexter, which I find really interesting. Well, what do you think of him like socially in terms of interacting with people?
Well, it's clear they wanted to make him a lot less able to do that, or at least he does it a lot worse than he would in the original show, where, you know, in Original Sin, he's not as good at interacting with, let's say, Sophia as like a girlfriend type. He doesn't really know how to handle that, where with Rita he's much more able to pretend to do certain things. Obviously in the first season they have some funny moments between them where Dexter looks at her when she's crying with wide eyes, doesn't know what to do. It's really, really funny. And with Sophia, he doesn't know how to do the whole boyfriend thing, And, you know, it comes to the point where he makes mistakes, hides the trophies, Deb finds them. He's not a very good brother to Deb either. He does certain things like going to find, you know, Geo and his fiance, but that's because Harry tells him to. I can't stop getting the smirk out of my head. That smirk, man.
Yeah.
The smirk is so funny.
I mean, at first, I thought the smirk was really bad, and I saw all the memes, and I did agree with them, but as the show has gone on, I have started... I've seen a few comments saying the same thing. I do think what the smirk is him trying to mask in a way and just sort of socially fit in. And I think that does kind of fit his character.
You said it in your video as well. Michael C. Hall has quite a smirky face. Like, he just kind of always has that look where it's like he's between smiling and frowning.
I never even noticed it.
Patrick Gibson does a very good job at imitating a young Michael C. Hall. And he is a bit more buff, but that's definitely, he's swole, dude.
He's huge.
And that's definitely because that is Dexter in his physical prime, where in Dexter, the original show, he's in his mid-30s at that point, if I'm not mistaken.
He's got a family and kids.
Here he's 20. Yeah, he has a family. He has Aster and Cody. And where here he's the imperfect, like, psychopath who's much more interested in just getting that release. And they do a good job at showing him dealing with not being able to get that or having to wait for Harry to tell him things.
I agree with you, and I think his relationship with Harry is probably the most important thing about this show, and something that they always talk about in the original Dexter show, but here we really get to see it and see what it was like.
Absolutely. Seeing Harry in that relation to Dexter, where in the original show we kind of saw the tail end of that.
Yeah.
With him like kind of going off the deep end, and then eventually, you know, just for YouTube's sake, I'm not going to say what he does, but he does a bad thing to himself.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with his relationship with Dexter in the original show, like I said, we saw the end of it, so we saw Harry kind of coming down off of realizing what he's done. He created this monster, where in this show we see it with Levi Reed, where Harry is so, like, he's so enraged by Levi Reed getting out that he just tells Dexter to go take him out.
Yeah, and I think they did a really good job of recreating those moments as well, because it's quite hard to do when you have different actors, and I think they really paid homage to the original show, and it's clear it was made with a lot of love, I think. Now, a lot of talk before the show actually started was around the casting, and a lot of people were really impressed with the casting. I had to agree. I think a lot of the characters look really good, like for like, but this isn't something I like to judge the show on. I mean, you take a show like The Last of Us, for example, and the characters don't look the same, but the actors are still great, and that's what's really important. And in that case, I know people complain about Ellie, but if you want the character to look like Ellie, just play the game, please. I don't want to see any arguments in these comments. I don't care. I mean, the characters that do look most the same, and again, it's an interesting aspect that they do look quite similar, but it doesn't add to the show. Angel and Masuka, for example, they're characters I enjoy having in the show, but they feel a bit like wallpaper, kind of. You know, they're nice to have in the show, and they do add to it, but they're just sort of there. They don't really add to the storyline too much. And characters like Tonya and Harry, who aren't in the original show, I mean, Harry is to some extent, but to me, those two characters are much more important and much more interesting. Tonya is a really welcome extra to this show. I was surprised how much I liked her character, and even though she didn't do much, I think in future seasons she could be a really interesting regular on the show. I mean, in my opinion, the character that actually looks least like the original actor is Deborah, and she gives the most like-for-like performance in my opinion. Her performance is almost exactly the same as Jennifer Carpenter's, and again, she does so well in this role. Now, I mean, there's an AI footage where they took the old Deborah and laid it over her face, and it's freakish how similar it is. She did a really good job. But again, me and SilenceAve spoke about it. Here's our conversation about that.
I think I've definitely warmed up to Deb a lot more as the show's gone on.
Yeah.
Where originally I feel like I was kind of turned off from the whole Deb storyline because of the high school stuff in New Blood, where I'm like, oh, we don't need more high school drama in Dexter. We don't need more of this. And I was wrong. I'll be the first to say I was wrong, because as we've gotten further into the story, we realize that Deb is acting out because she wants to be more involved in Harry and Dexter's life and have that more loving family, especially because her mother passed away a bit prior to the show. And we get to see Deb kind of look for that male validation elsewhere in a character like Geo, and just, you know, punching what's her name, the cheerleader girl, not the cheerleader, the volleyball girl,
generic female bully. Yeah,
generic female bully. We get to see her punch, you know, her bully or her rival in the volleyball team, and how she kind of just stops caring because her life is just going to hell ever since she lost her mother. And I feel like we didn't get that much in the original show. We heard about it, but we didn't see it as much.
I mean, her mum is definitely this invisible character in the show, and I know they use the chair to represent her, don't they, at the dinner table, which is really interesting. Mm-hmm. But I think Deb's character in the show is so important, and her storyline, like you said, it really shows how much she is missing attention from Harry and Dexter, and how badly she wants to fit in with them. And it does sort of explain a lot of Deb's future behaviours, because a lot of people ask, why does she need a new boyfriend every season? Why does she move from man to man? Whereas this is very typical behaviour for someone who is, you know, lacking that attention from their father or even from the, you know, any of their parents, because her mother has died. And it's also interesting to see how the mother dying affected Dexter. I think that the mum's presence in the show, though she's not there, I think that's really felt.
His mother being the only person to truly see what he says is the good in him, even though he doesn't believe there is any. I think that was one of the final things keeping him from finally doing the thing. And
definitely, yeah.
When she passed away and it was just Harry now, who Harry, as we find out, you know, in the first episode, which is a new plot line, is that he lost a previous son, and he doesn't want to lose Dexter, but he's not a very good father. So he does things in a way that kind of mess things up.
That leads on to my next question, which before we go on to that, I do just want to say I think the actor for Deborah is the best actress in the show. And I also want to say the old actor for Deborah, Jennifer Carpenter, she never got the credit she deserved. They're both great actresses. If you're enjoying the video so far, please do remember to like and subscribe. Again, the channel's been growing exponentially recently. It's something I really appreciate. Also, consider becoming a member. It helps me create these videos and keep the channel running. Big thank you. Let's move back onto the video. So Aaron Spencer's storyline in the show is quite important, though I think once you figure out he's not Captain Matthews, which admittedly took me a while, it becomes quite obvious that he is the killer. The storyline feels very late Dexter to me, you know, sort of Tom Hanks' character, or Tom Hanks' son's character.
Hello, whore.
You know, in the late seasons would have a serial killer or a bad guy, I guess, throughout the whole season. I'm not too keen on his character, but I mean, it does cater towards Dexter becoming sort of a hero and having someone worse than him to fight, I guess, which he needs ultimately to justify his existence. It also shows a bit of Dexter's humanity. Again, his relationship with children, even in the books, is really important. So I think this was a really interesting way of showing it, and it shows again how the writers of the show do care about Dexter and they do appreciate the good qualities of him. They understand him, which is so important. I think Harry's character is really important, and he has a big role in this storyline as well. I mean, I'm going to show you my conversation with SilenceAve around Harry in a minute, but I do compare him to Homer Simpson, and what I mean by this is, in the original show, he's this badass dad who's always so concerned about his son and only gives the correct advice. Here, he's drinking beer and eating donuts most of the time. You know, he's not taking care of himself. He's suffering with loss, but also a lot of guilt, I think, and he's a really interesting character. I mean, they really show you how he is in this show. He is not a perfect man, and again, me and SilenceAve spoke about him. Check this out. I think Harry, what do you think of his storyline in the show? And because he's a new character, he's a character we know, but he's a completely new, fresh character in this show, and a lot of people haven't warmed to him. What do you think of him?
I like his character for what his character is, but I don't see him as Harry Morgan, personally. I like him as a cop dad.
So you've read the book,
yeah.
So you really do have a different understanding to Harry that I do. What is it that makes him more of a cop dad? Which, when you say that, I just think of Bella Swan's dad in Twilight. But what makes you see more of that than as what you imagine Harry Morgan to be?
Well, because for me, I've read the first 2 books of the Dexter book series, and I still have quite a bit to go, but I feel like I got a pretty good grasp on at least where we are in the story at that point.
Yeah.
Where Harry has had a pretty messed up past, where in the book, it was his father doing something for his 16th birthday with a woman that is quite promiscuous, and that messes him up for a very long time. And in Original Sin, it's the loss of his son that messes him up for a very long time.
Yeah.
And when we deal with the original show Dexter with, James Remar, he, to me, is my favorite version of Harry, because in the book we haven't gotten much of him, and in, Christian Slater as the Harry in Original Sin. But James Remar's character is what Dexter imagines Harry to be. That is who Harry is to him. Where Original Sin is more who Harry is.
It's very much sort of this is my dad, he's awesome. And it's kind of a nice way to represent Harry, I think, but it's almost like a godly figure for Dexter. And in this show, Original Sin, it's definitely not. Although Dexter definitely still looks up to him and still respects his rule, you see Harry really for what he is, I think.
In the original show, we deal with Dexter's image of Harry quite a bit, where when that image gets shattered, right, he resents Harry and he throws him away and he doesn't need him anymore, and then he comes back. Harry is definitely, even more than Doris, even more than Brian, even more than Deborah, Harry is Dexter's most important relationship throughout his whole life. And the way that they portray Harry in Original Sin, I feel like is really good. I really like his story. He is probably my favorite storyline of the whole show, but I still have yet to see him as Harry Morgan.
I mean, I'd agree with you on that. I think the way they represent him, they do this sort of, the way Homer Simpson is a very stereotypical dad. Harry Morgan, he drinks, he smokes. He's not this badass super cop that Deb and Dexter and the whole police force make him out to be. He's not like this hero. If anything, he's just a relatively normal father. But he definitely does care and love Dexter. And there are aspects of what you hear about him in the original Dexter show that you see here that you think, okay, that is Harry. But I understand where you're coming from. It does feel like there is something sort of missing to the, I guess, to his seriousness, maybe. I don't know what it is for you, but for me, I feel, I don't know. He's got the whole, like, thought daughter or psychopath killer son about him, but I don't know. He doesn't seem to take it too seriously as much as I thought he would.
I feel like, for me, maybe this is unfair to me because obviously, or unfair of me, because obviously Christian Slater can't be James Remar. They can't be the same person. But James Remar just has a certain presence during the show.
Yeah.
That I feel like Christian Slater doesn't have. And I feel like that's very important to the character of Harry. Where in the original show, because of James Remar's serious face, his whole demeanor, the times when he does let the veil slip a little bit, they're much more impactful. Where in Original Sin, we see Harry lose his cool quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you say that you don't want to be unfair to him because he's not the actor, but that is the case with every single actor on this show. I think, you can say for Dexter, for Deborah, a lot of them do feel the same. So it's a fair criticism.
He still does do a good job, though. I feel like Christian Slater does a good job of portraying the character he was given.
He does.
He's just not James Remar.
Throughout the season, there are constant flashbacks with Harry and Laura Moser. And I mean, my first criticism of this is, how does Dexter remember this? We're supposed to be looking at Dexter's life through his own eyes. I mean, that's the premise of this show. That's how it opens up. So that's my first criticism. My second criticism is, what is this filter? This is worse than the Breaking Bad yellow filter. It just makes everyone look so awkward. And Christ, don't even get me started on Harry's hair. They could have at least fixed his hairline a bit. This just looks mental. Again, this storyline shows how badly Harry messed up, and it also confirms the question around Dexter that has been going around, even on this channel, for years now. Is Dexter a psychopath, or did Harry create him? And it's very clear now. he was not born a psychopath. Harry had a massive role in moulding him, even if it wasn't on purpose. It's quite interesting actually looking at Brian's story, and you can see he kills the lizards before anything bad actually happens to him, so you can argue those violent urges are within him beforehand. But after what Brian sees, and not being able to forget that the way Dexter is, because Dexter blocks it out, Brian is always going to struggle. I mean, they show the graphic, I don't know if I'll even be able to show it in this video, but the absolute brutality of it you see. And Brian is 9 years old. There's no way he's going to be able to deal with this in a normal way. And it does a great job of explaining his character. And again, after this video, if you want, do check out my video on Brian. I was really interested in his story, and I thought it was so interesting that they brought him into this show. And the way they brought him into this show was incredible. I loved it. I think it's worth saying the older actor really does look like Laura Moser as well. Apparently they're not related, but they look really similar to me. It's kind of freaky. And he does a great job. I mean, I don't know if everyone agrees. I know my girlfriend said she wasn't too keen on his acting performance, but slate her in the comments, not me. That's all I'm saying. This is something else I spoke to SilenceAve about. Here is the footage. And that leads to my next segment, which is about Brian being involved in the show. Obviously, I made a video about this, and this is something that I got at first, when he was first introduced in episode 2, I thought this was a bit much. I found it a bit cringe, to be honest. But the way they've built him in, I can't lie, it's fucking epic. This is something I love about the show, and it's probably the best thing about the show in my opinion. So I was completely wrong on that. How do you feel about Brian being involved?
Initially, I thought it was going to be a bit of a bait and switch where that wasn't going to be Brian, but I think that the way, like you said, the way that they've built him into the plot of this story makes a lot of sense. And I really liked how they went deeper into why Harry didn't keep Brian around.
Yeah.
Because initially people would be like, why, like, these kids went through the same thing. It doesn't really make much sense why he would keep Dexter and not Brian.
Didn't they say something about, I don't remember who said this, but they said something like he thought Dexter was younger so that he could sort of forget about it, whereas he already knew that Brian had it in him. But that doesn't really make sense.
Yeah, they mentioned how he was a bit too old. He was a bit too old and he would have remembered too much.
Yeah.
But like you said, it doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. And I feel like in the original show, that was a bit of a cop-out answer to be able to get that big reveal at the end of season 1.
With Original Sin, obviously, he tries to kill Harry as a child, tries to kill Deb, and that's why they disown him. And that, for me, is a situation where you have a kid who's not really at fault because he's a child and he's been through something terrible. But he does something terrible, and then you have parents who aren't at fault, but it creates this whole situation that creates the whole story essentially for Dexter, and that is what I really loved about that little choice they made, and the choice to involve that. It just adds a little detail that really improves the entire plot of the show.
The thing about Original Sin is, in a lot of ways, people, especially me, I've said this since before the show came out, I said it's a prequel. This is a terrifying concept for Dexter because a prequel can ruin so much more than a sequel. Very rarely do we have a prequel that adds positivity to the original source material. Yeah. And I feel like we got a very good amount of that here. I don't care what nobody says. Original Sin is better than New Blood. 100,000%.
1,000,000%.
And
New Blood was what made me worry about
1,000,000%. Brian's inclusion in this story makes a lot of sense, and I've seen a lot of people mention, oh, he saw him in episode 2, why wouldn't he recognize him in season 1? You don't recognize everyone you meet for 5 seconds. Yeah. Like, he just said, no, you can't sit here. No, that's all, that was their entire interaction.
He doesn't even really look at him, does he?
Yeah, and that's not to mention, he doesn't remember his brother at all. He had a brother for 3 years.
Yeah, sorry.
And
just
by 3,
you imagine that scene where he reveals, I'm your brother, or whatever, or he meets him with Deborah and he goes, oh wait, I saw you at that Miami bar 15 years ago. That just wouldn't happen.
It doesn't make sense. Like, I can guarantee every single person watching this video has met someone in their life that for 5 seconds at what was the waitress at the last restaurant you went to? You have no clue. Stuff happens. You don't remember everyone you meet. And that's why for people who are complaining about that, it doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah.
But I think that it's cool to see, especially Brian. I think you were the one who actually mentioned it in your newest video, which, by the way, if you guys haven't seen it, go watch it. It's very, very good.
Please do.
Please do. Him just watching Dexter at crime scenes. Like, it's cool how they've managed to make his presence felt as a bit of a B plot. And obviously we know there's not going to be a resolution to that storyline in Original Sin. Original Sin will end, we'll get to that later, but Original Sin will end with another killer being dealt with. And his inclusion throughout the entire storyline so far has felt very organic. It hasn't felt like they've tried to shoehorn Brian in. They let the story take 9 episodes, or 8 episodes, I mean, before we got the reveal that he's even involved. I started to realize it a bit more as, like, you know, we saw the people who were dying were people who Brian has targeted in the original show.
Yeah.
And he's finding his motive, he's finding his reasoning, and I feel like it's a very good way that they've included him, rather than just like showing him looking at Dexter from a rooftop.
To me, what's really interesting as well is this idea of Dexter understanding his brother as well, and as his brother is committing these murders that he doesn't know it's his brother, he's relating to him. And he's saying, you know, he knows his motive right away. And that's a really interesting way of connecting the brothers without them ever even knowing each other are involved.
It's such a cool way to show Brian's involvement. And he's one of those characters who you could do something like this with. It would be so much different. Like, even they had Miguel Prado in this for like a quick cameo.
Yeah.
But it didn't, neither of them felt shoehorned in, neither of them felt forced, where like if you randomly just had Dexter run into Trinity, like he goes on like a trip somewhere because Trinity's doing his whole like building blocks thing, and he goes and like runs into him real quick at like a bar, like that would feel a bit like, okay, you just wanted to do that because you know it would get attention. But they've managed to do this in a way where everything feels natural and not everything has to have a Dexter subplot. No. I can guarantee you Brian will not interact with Dexter in the finale. That won't happen.
People keep telling me like, oh, the next, if they do season 2, they have to have a few more Brian episodes. And I guess they could do that, but at the same time, you can't keep including Brian in the show too much, because eventually he'll have to interact with one of the characters, or he'll have to be involved in the story somehow, you know, the way he is this season. But they've managed to get away with it this season because, you know, they're investigating the murder and it's sort of Harry who figures it out. But they can't keep doing that because you need to keep him and Dexter completely apart. And Dexter's this super intellectual guy who would figure it out. So that's why I think he needs his own show rather than being involved in this one, if they are to, you know, involve him in future projects.
They make it feel like how a lot of people have always kind of predicted, like, is Dexter actually a psychopath? When you have Brian, who was exhibiting these behaviors the entire time, and then you see Dexter not exhibiting those behaviors. Well, Dexter's this good kid, Brian's this troublemaker, and it kind of makes you look back and think, is Dexter just doing all of this out of trauma, whereas Brian was going to end up like this anyway?
Yeah.
And they've done a lot of good through those flashbacks at showing us that there's a possibility that Harry is the reason that Dexter's the way he is, or, you know, they could have thrown Dexter into a hospital, got him checked out. I know they did that to Brian, but Brian was messed up anyway. They've done a very good job at showing the Dexter-Brian connection without them actually having interacted more than that one time at the sandwich shop.
If you got this far in the video, definitely check out SilenceAve's channel.
On my channel, really all I do is I just bullshit about TV shows and entertainment stuff I like. Sometimes I talk about movies. Max has been a great person to talk to about this stuff because on this whole content creator journey we're both relatively new. And I'm happy he invited me onto his channel to talk about this stuff. Hopefully,
varying levels of success.
You like having me here. Hopefully you liked having me here. Check out Max's last video because I think it's one of his best.
Nice, thank you. And check out SilenceAve's last every video. So yeah, overall I really enjoyed this show, and if I had to give it a rating, for me this is the definition of an 8 out of 10. It feels really ambitious, and I think the people who made the show really loved it. Even the actors involved clearly cared about the characters, and this for me is so important, and this is one of the reasons this show became so good. However, I think it could have been better, and there are definitely a few aspects of it that are easily criticised. I'm sure a lot of you will let me know what you think in the comments, but I think the overall sort of consensus around the conversation of this show is that it is good. A lot of people have enjoyed it, and I don't see how you can't. It's just a refreshing take on Dexter, and it's something that harks back to the older seasons of Dexter. This is a really positive look going forward, and although I was concerned about some of the other spin-offs they were doing, this makes me look forward to them a lot more. They really had to bang this one out the park. Paramount, it was so important for them to have a good show here, and they did amazingly. This is the first time Dexter has felt like Dexter since season 4. This wasn't a cash grab, and that's the most important thing about this show. So again, let me know what you think. Leave a comment. I appreciate all the comments I've had on my Dexter videos. This will probably be the last one for a while, at least until Resurrection comes out. And a massive thank you to SilenceAve for coming on the channel. Show him some love in the comments. Maybe leave a comment on one of his videos and say that I sent you there if you got this far. I'd really appreciate that. Again, it was great to have a conversation with him. We spoke off camera for a bit as well, and he's a really cool dude. He's a really good guy. I'd definitely recommend checking out his content. It's great. But if you enjoyed this video and you liked me for whatever reason, remember to like and follow. I really appreciate all the engagement I've had recently. It's amazing to me. And if you like these sort of videos, these longer videos, become a member, because they take effort and time and resource, and I need some help. So again, thank you everyone for interacting with these videos. I really appreciate it. Goodbye.